Welcome to the Foster. I'm Ann Baxter in Palo Alto, California, and I'm with artist explorer Tony Foster, who is zooming in his home studio in Cornwall, England. Hi, Tony.
Hi, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. Today, you'll find me in front of Tony's artwork, Wistmans Wood, looking south-southwest. Tony painted this in 2013 for Exploring Beauty Watercolor Diaries from the Wild, another stunning, very large watercolor. So first of all, let's talk about this special place in the county of Devon in the southwest of England. What's the history of Dartmoor?
Well, of course, Dartmoor is a very ancient landscape. It's got these fantastic what we call tors, which are outcrops of granite rock, where really basically the land has been worn away until nothing's left but the bare bones. And it's got a wonderful atmosphere to it. It's a high upland, very severe and sparse, but with some wonderful deep valleys cut into the landscape by the rocks and the folds, and by the constant wearing away of the water. And little streams then become rivers, and so it's bisected by all these beautiful clear, I wouldn't call them mountains, but very, very clear streams that ripple through these deep valleys. It's a very romantic place, and there are lots of novels and books have been written about it, and it's very sparsely populated. It's owned, I guess, mostly owned by the duchy, by Prince Charles, in fact, but there are some private landowners too, and it's free of access. In other words, you can walk over all of it without having to stick to footpaths or get anybody's permission, and so it's a wonderful place.
How is Wistmans Wood, just 8.5 acres or so in the larger Dartmoor, how has that remained after all these years? It's remained untouched.
Yes, it has, and it's a strange thing because Dartmoor is overrun with sheep. There are loads and loads of sheep, and sheep, of course, crop very close to the ground, and so any tree, that little sapling that pokes its head up above the ground, is going to get nibbled off by the sheep, and so it's astonishing that this little wood actually survives. And the reason I think it survives is that it's surrounded by these boulders, and it's full of boulders, all covered in mosses, and the sheep just can't get in there very comfortably, and so they leave it alone, and so the trees, I guess, have been left alone for hundreds of years. And so I think it's protected by the fact that it's a sort of big boulder field, really, and the sheep are just ranging around on the open hillside and don't actually attempt to get into the place, which is extraordinary, really.
That could be a reason the trees are kind of stunted. I was reading they're ancient hardwood oak trees, and some have been aged at 400 years old, but they're not very tall at all.
No, they're very tiny and very short, and that's probably because of the high winds, I expect, that whistle across Dartmoor, at high freezing cold winds, which you probably tend to stunt a lot of trees and a lot of growth, really.
So what are the threats today? And how
well, the chief threat today, I'm afraid, I've got to say, has been brought on by social media. When I painted this wood 8 years ago, I was probably there, I think, for maybe 5 days I was working on this piece, and I probably only saw 3 or 4 people that entire time. And I was absolutely shocked recently to see the place is completely overrun with people now. And that's because it got put on social media. People went there, had a magical experience, had to blasted well tell everybody about it, and suddenly it's now become a must go to place for hundreds of people. And people have trashed it. I mean, you're asked by the national park not to actually go into the wood because you will tread on all the precious mosses and lichens, which are very rare, some of them, and which give the wood its very special and beautiful quality. And yet people ignore that and just go walking into the wood and clambering over the boulders, squashing the mosses, and leaving crap and litter and dog shit in their wake, and they've spoilt it, and you cannot now go and feel that you have any kind of experience at all because it's simply been totally spoiled. And I mean, I'm a great believer in I mean, it seems funny if people see my paintings, and so they obviously realize that this is an extraordinary place. But I don't think my paintings can be blamed on the fact that it's become so popular. I think very few people, relatively speaking, see my paintings, and those that do don't necessarily all rush off to go to that place themselves. They just accept that this is a wonderful place, and they've enjoyed the painting, but that's as far as it goes. And Wistmans Wood was a sort of, I would say it was a sort of well-kept secret in that people didn't really talk about it. Everybody would whisper to their friends if they thought they were the right kind of people who would enjoy it and respect it. But unfortunately, social media has got no filter or doesn't censor people out. And so the place is absolutely now just swarmed over by people. And it's tragic, really. And people, I don't know, they seem to have no idea what it is they're looking for, or what they're there for, or what it is they're supposed to be enjoying. They go, they have a bit of a picnic, maybe they take a selfie or two, and they leave again, and report it as a big adventure. Well, it's not very far from the road. It's not very far from a hotel, and so it's not exactly hidden away. I know it seems selfish for me to say, well, I've been, but nobody else should go. I don't say that, but I think that if people do go, they should respect the place. Otherwise, they destroy whatever it is they're supposed to be looking for.
Do you think the quarantine with people in lockdown has had any effect on the number of visits to Wistmans Wood?
I don't think so, no, because in between the lockdowns, well, first of all, of course, we weren't supposed to drive far from our homes, but that was relaxed, and people began to ignore that anyway. And so a lot more people were out because they were furloughed and weren't in work. And so a lot more people were out and looking for places to go to. And so I don't think it made any difference, really. I think perhaps it added to it, in fact.
I want to talk a little bit about John Hawkes, who's the luminary for this site. And have you been to Wistmans Wood with him?
Oh yes, I have, a couple of times, because he was the person who suggested I should paint it, and I went with him twice, I think, to look at it, and then I went again. I think I went 3 times altogether to try and check out and find a site that suited me. So yes, when he proposed it, I went to look to see if I could find the absolutely perfect vantage point, and it took a while.
What made this the exact right place?
Well, I suppose it's partly to do with the shape of the foreground trees, which kind of form a frame, really, to that little tree, or that tree, lovely little gnarled tree in the middle ground. And all you needed, really, to give a sense of the mystery of the place was some fog going across it, and a little bit of light to sort of give a little tiny, very subtle spotlight on that middle tree. And suddenly I looked at it and thought, yes, that's it. That's what I need. And the boulders in the foreground, of course, were very typical of that area, and also nicely arranged. And so it just seemed to suit very well. And to find 3 or 4 really characterful ancient gnarled trees, all in the same piece of perspective was pretty good, I thought. So yeah. And also finding somewhere to actually sit. I mean, it's not just the sheep find it difficult to get in there. I mean, humans find it difficult to find anywhere comfortable anywhere around it, really, because it's all these knobbly old boulders.
And you're going to be sitting there for a few days, so you want some
exactly.
place.
And so I found a nice flat spot to sit and was able to get on with it. Yeah,
that's settled.
So, yeah.
Well, back to John.
Yeah.
John Hawkes is also a beautiful writer and raconteur. So he's talking about, this is what he says about Wistmans Wood. Wondrously counter to most of our natural places of beauty. Well, he wrote this a few years ago, but he said this wood, Wistmans Wood, is slowly increasing and not diminishing. Perhaps it is this tenacity and hopefulness that give an extra quality to this quiet and mysterious place, suggesting that beauty lies beyond the pictorial. It is a place of beauty in a metaphor, which is so enriching to the soul. So
yeah, it is. It's got a sort of luminosity, which, particularly when a little shaft of sun comes out, they're almost dazzling in its. The greens of the lichens and mosses are almost dazzling, and you in a way, you tend to think that you can't paint them that bright because it wouldn't look real. And in fact,
That is it.
That's exactly what it's like. It's extraordinary.
Well, I love you're painting it in October where you have the fall color too. So that's even brings out the greens more because there's that contrast and the
Exactly,
oranges and the
yes.
reds. Very
Yeah,
striking.
yeah.
One thing that's not on all your artworks, but I particularly love, and it's on this one, is the brushstrokes of color that you have on in the margins, which to me, it's like a wonderful looseness or creativity, just kind of spontaneity. And I'm wondering if you could talk about what those brushstrokes signify again. Are you testing colors?
Yes, that's what I'm doing. Because of course it's one thing to mix it up on your palette. It's another to actually put it next to a color that you've already put on the paper. All colors affect each other, and you know, you don't know quite how that's going to work until you do it. And so yes, I mix it up on my palette, and then I just dab a bit on the paper to see. But it's also, in some ways, it's sort of speed, really. I'm just trying to get on with it, you know. And so the quickest way to deal with it is just to dab it onto the paper and see, you know, how it's going to react to the other colors. And it's a matter of adjustment, usually. I just adjust them subtly. I mean, it's not as if I'm going to change from green to red, you know, it's simply subtle amounts of yellow or subtle amounts of hooker's green or whatever, just to change the thing slightly. And these slight differences are what makes the difference, you know, makes it a subtle, it's a subtle color palette, really. And you have to be careful with it. You know, you can't be too brash, really.
Right. But you could trim that off. So I like it that you keep it in the artwork. So is that like, why do you leave it?
Well, it's because because in a way the paintings are all the story of what happens. They're the story of my time spent in a place, and the story of my response to it, and the story of what I hear and see and feel, and the story of how the painting itself gets made. So it's all part of the same story, really. And it's about spending time in a place, and this is what it gets created. And so you know, I don't want to conceal anything. I want to be honest. I want to be honest about what I don't want to tidy things up. You know, it's not a tidy thing to paint in the outdoors, and
especially on this scale.
Yeah, and so it's just trying to be honest, really, I think.
I'm particularly drawn to those leaf portrait souvenirs that you did that are the souvenirs at the bottom, and a lot of people spend time focus on that and wondering how you created them so specifically with so much detail.
Well, I brought them home with me is what I did. I collected them up and brought them home and spread them out on a drawing board on my studio table and simply copied them. I mean, it was, you know, luckily, you know, they weren't going to get blown around by the wind, or it was the only way I could do it, really.
And then did you arrange them and then you just leave that way for a couple of days, or did you do that all in one day? I mean, there's a lot of work there.
I think I did it all in one day, I think. Wow. Because they do, you know, as they dry out in the studio, they do tend to curl up or change shape. And so I wanted to get them done in one day. I seemed to think it was quite a long day, but yeah.
Beautiful. So yes, you have the map as usual, the leaves that we talked about, and then one dried oak leaf in the acrylic jewel box. And why is that a souvenir?
I don't know. It's just, I think there again, you know, that will change over time. You know, those leaves and things that I put in those jewel boxes, they will change. They're not going to stay the same, and I think that's good. I think it might end up as just crumbs at the bottom, but that's fine. That's what happens to us all. We end up as crumbs at the bottom too. So in a way, it's simply about time passing, and you know and so I don't think it's changed very much in the years that since it was done, but eventually it will. You know, in 50 years' time, it might well turn into a bunch of crumbs at the bottom of that little box.
I want to close on reading the end of your inscription here that's on your mat of Wistmans Wood. It says, part of your diary notes, October 11th, pack up at dusk and leave no trace.
Well, yeah, leave no trace, absolutely. I even stood the grass stalks back up again.
Oh, well, thank you for your time, Tony, and thank you for sharing your talents once again and your wonderful stories with us.
You're very welcome. It's nice to remember these things, actually, I must say.